This lesson aims at providing you with an overview of social welfare programs and services available to women in India. It attempts to do so by establishing the need for social welfare programs and services for women, tracing the evolution of welfare programs through various approaches to the development of women, understanding the institutional framework in India for formulating and implementing policies and programs for the welfare of women, and discussing some of the important social welfare schemes developed and offered by central and state governments in India. Objectives. On the completion of this lesson, explain the need for social welfare programs and services for women in India, make a comparative analysis in the different approaches to the welfare of women in India, understand the role of the ministry and some institutions in developing and implementing policies and programs for the welfare of women in India, and describe the essential features of some important programs and services aimed at the welfare of women in India. Need for social welfare programs and services for women in India. It is a well established fact that women in Indian society face discrimination at various levels. Hence, they are rightly considered as vulnerable and marginalized depending on their social, economic and political status. Following are the major factors responsible for their low socio-economic condition. Low literacy and educational status. Education is considered to be one of the important factors required to be independent and empowered. Sadly, literacy and educational status of women in India is low when compared to men. As per the 2011 census, the literacy rate for females was 64.63%, while it was 80.9% for males. Lower nutritional and health condition. Women in India suffer from lack of nutritious food and are generally found to be anemic. Quite often, their health needs are also greatly neglected. Low employment and income level. Women are traditionally expected to be housebound and not encouraged to be financially independent. As per National Sample Survey carried out in the year 2011-12, 59.3% of the female workers in rural India are self-employed in comparison to 54.5% of their male counterparts. Similarly, 6th economic census in the year 2013-14 showed that only 18.29% of the workers employed in various organizations are females. Unfavorable social norms. There are many cultural and social norms which place severe restriction on the lives of women at various levels. The patriarchal system, which considers women unworthy of rights, independent of men, has not changed much over 70 years of independence. For example, 35% of crimes categorized as crime against a woman in the year 2015 are perpetrated by their husbands and relatives. Lack of political participation. Despite women forming almost half of India's population, their representation and participation in political system and policy formulating bodies is very low and many a time highly passive. For instance, in the year 2016, only 12% of Central Council of Ministers were women. Similarly, the share of women judges in Supreme Court was only 4%. Due to the factors discussed so far, women in India have remained vulnerable and marginalized. Hence, Indian Constitution in its preamble, fundamental rights, fundamental duties and directive principles has made sufficient provision for the state to come out with various policies, legislation and welfare measures aimed at their protection and empowerment. Approaches to the welfare of women in India. We shall now briefly discuss different approaches adopted so far for providing social welfare programs and services to women in India. The approaches, although cannot be put into watertight compartments, can be broadly termed as welfare approach, women in development approach, participatory approach, gender and development approach, and empowerment approach. Now let's look into welfare approach. In the initial phase of planning, welfare programs and services in India, that is in the 1950s and 1960s, early 1960s, the overall approach was welfare oriented. Residual welfare assistance given to the programs on nutrition, home economics and child welfare reinforced women's role as mothers, wives and homemakers, and did little to challenge the traditional exploitative system that continued to keep them vulnerable and marginalized. The policies and programs also did not recognize the role of women in productive development activities. Women in development. It was in the earlier 1970s that women in development concept started gaining currency. This approach started to recognize women as contributors to the economy and sought to integrate women in development efforts by improving their accesses to resources and benefits. Participatory approach. The thrust of welfare programs and services from the 8th Plan 1992 to 97 onwards was on organizing women into groups and strengthening their organizations so that they could play an active role in planning and implementation of various developmental programs. Some of the important achievements of this phase were setting up the National Commission for Women to safeguard women's rights, Indira Mahila Yojana to encourage an integrated approach to women empowerment through self-help groups, enactment of 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts paving the way for participation of women in local bodies. Gender and development. In order to overcome the shortcomings of WID, the gender and development approach was incorporated into the planning in the 1980s. This approach sought to include women in the development agenda and attempted to adopt a transformational strategy aimed at countering institutional barriers in households, communities, markets and the state that came in the way of their development and empowerment. Empowerment approach. In the recent decades, the government has been trying to adopt empowerment approach together with GAD. Empowerment approach tries to facilitate the process of enabling women to have control over their physical, mental or psychological, social, economic and political lives. 9th Plan, for example, adopted the National Policy for Empowerment of Women in the year 2001 and directed both the central and the states to adopt a special strategy for women's component plan through which not less than 30% of funds or benefits should be earmarked for the empowerment of women in all the women related sectors. Institutional framework for the welfare and empowerment of women. Before looking at some of the important welfare schemes implemented by the present governments, let us look at ministry or institutions that have been set up by the government to initiate and monitor these schemes. Ministry of Women and Child Development by the Government of India. From the year 1985 to 2006, the Department of Women and Child Welfare was working under the aegis of Ministry of Human Resource Development. However, it was declared as an independent ministry on 30th Jan 2006. The ministry has been promoting interministerial and intersectorial convergence to create gender equitable and child-centric legislation, policies and programs such as Integrated Child Development Services and Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. National Commission for Women. National Commission for Women is an autonomous body under the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Its aim is to facilitate redressal of grievances of women and to advise the government on all policy matters affecting women. Prominent programs and services aimed at the welfare of women in India. There are several women welfare programs and services offered by the central and state governments. As majority of these programs and services are implemented in public-private partnership model, there are many NGOs to actively partnering with the governments in implementing these schemes. Women welfare programs and services can broadly be categorized as programs and services aimed at protection and rehabilitation of women in difficult circumstances, nutrition and health needs of women, employment and educational needs of women, better networking and coordinating between agencies working for women, programs and services for vulnerable women and women in difficult circumstances. Some of the women require greater attention and resources by the governments as they are more vulnerable and marginalized than others. Important categories of women found in difficult circumstances: violence and trauma, domestic violence survivors, rape survivors, trafficked women, women suffering due to witch hunting, acid attack survivors, internal displacement, disasters and migration, either for economic reasons, conflict, for example refugee women, or women who have been displaced because of special economic zones, buildings of dams, etc., women impacted by natural or man-made disasters, forced or exploitative labor practices, bonded laborers, domestic laborers, destitute or homeless women, landless women, marginal farmers, agricultural workers. Ill health, women affected by HIV or AIDS, women suffering from life-threatening diseases, women with disabilities, elderly women, living alone, widows, women whose husbands are missing, women forced to migrate alone, divorced women, unmarried women, unwed mothers. Others, slum dwellers, women prisoners, women belonging to ethnic and socially vulnerable communities, women belonging to ethnic and religious minorities, especially Muslims, women belonging to socially backward communities such as SCs, STs or OBCs, homeless and destitute women. The following schemes are being implemented by the government for their protection and rehabilitation. Swadhar Ghar. This is a scheme that caters to the primary needs of women in difficult circumstances. An evaluation of short stay home for women in operation since 1969 and Swadhar in operation since 2001 to 2002. In the year 2007, recommended for the merger of both these schemes as there were many similarities and duplications of the functions in these schemes. Hence, in 2018 onwards, the Swadhar Ghar scheme has been restructured to act as a supportive institutional framework for women victims of difficult circumstances so that they could lead their life with dignity and conviction. Short stay homes for women and girls. This scheme provides protection and rehabilitation of women and girls who are in social and moral danger due to breakage of families, mental stress, social exclusion or exploitation. Ujjwala. This scheme is aimed at prevention of trafficking as well as the rescue and rehabilitation of affected women. It is also responsible for reintegration and repatriation of such women. Mahila Police Volunteers. This scheme selects and trains responsible and socially aware women as Mahila Police Volunteers and utilize their services for facilitating police outreach on gender concerns. Nirbhaya Fund. Nirbhaya Fund has been envisaged to funding the projects specifically designed to improve the safety and security of women. The fund flow has been planned as follows. Public account, which is a non-lapsable fund, to the Ministry of Women and Child Development and other MOFs, central ministries, WCD projects, projects of state WCD departments, for projects by ministries, for projects by state government. Programs and services aimed at improving the nutritional and health status of women. Poshan Abhiyan. National Nutrition Mission has been envisaged for 3-year period starting from the year 2017-18 to monitor, supervise, fix targets and guide the nutrition related interventions across ministries. It also plans to set up nutrition resource centers aimed at improving nutrition levels among women and children in the country. Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. This scheme has been envisaged in accordance with the provision of Natural Food Security Act 2013 to improve the nutrition status of undernourished women. Janani Suraksha Yojana. This scheme is being implemented with the objective of reducing maternal and neonatal mortality by promoting institutional delivery among poor pregnant women. Programs and services aimed at employment and empowerment of women. Working Women Hostel. This scheme is aimed at ensuring availability of safe and conveniently located accommodation for working women who need to live away from their families due to professional commitments. Support to training and employment program for women. The aim of this scheme is to impart employable competencies to women so that they become self-employed or entrepreneurs. Rashtriya Mahila Kosh. This scheme is aimed at meeting microcredit needs of poor and assetless women in the informal sector. It is also known as National Credit Fund for Women. Mahila Core Yojana. This scheme provides and supports self-employment initiatives in the coir industry. The target group of this scheme is the rural women artisans in regions producing coir labor. Mahila E-Hut. It is an online marketing platform for women entrepreneurs or SHGs or NGOs for showcasing and marketing the products or services which are made or manufactured or undertaken by them. Women Entrepreneurship Platform. According to the NITI Aayog, this scheme aims to provide unified access portal which brings together women from different parts of India to realize their entrepreneurs' aspirations. Udyam Sakhi portal for women entrepreneurs. It is a network for nurturing social entrepreneurship by creating business models revolving around low-cost products and services to resolve social inequities. Mahila Shakti Kendras. This scheme has been recently envisaged to empower rural women through community participation. It plans to provide state resource center for women of all states and union territories in a phased manner and hopes to have community engagement through college student volunteers in most backward districts of the country. Programs and schemes for better networking and coordination of services for women. A Women Helpline Scheme. This scheme provides immediate and emergency response to women in distress 1091. This provides referral by linking with appropriate authorities such as police, one-stop center and hospital. One-stop center scheme. The aim of this scheme is to provide integrated support and assistance under one roof to women by integration with a women helpline to facilitate access various services such as emergency response and rescue services, medical assistance, etc. Assistance to women in lodging FIR or NCR or DIR, psychosocial support or counseling, legal aid, shelter and video conferencing facility are provided. Some of the important welfare programs and services for women initiated and managed by state governments are as follows. Women and welfare services provided by state governments. Single woman pension scheme implemented by the Telangana government. It provides pension to unmarried women, joginis, divorced women. She Means Business by Odisha government. It provides training on digital marketing skills to women entrepreneurs and self-help group members. Matrupurna, Karnataka government. It aims to meet the nutritional needs of pregnant and lactating women in rural areas. Sampurna, Shishu Auband Matru Mrityuhara Purna Nirakaran Abhijan Yojana, implemented by Odisha government, provides financial assistance to cover transport cost for pregnant women to travel to the hospital from inaccessible areas. Sakshyam Yojana, initiated by Chhattisgarh government. It helps in reducing the rate of interest on loan given to women. Kerala Nirbhaya scheme, implemented by the Kerala government. This scheme sensitizes and educates women and children regarding concepts of gender equality and crime and violence committed against women. Let's summarize today's class. This lesson has tried to give you an overview of the need for designing and implementing welfare programs and services for women. It has also attempted to trace the development of different approaches like welfare approach, participatory approach and empowerment approach for the welfare. Finally, it has tried to provide you with some understanding of the educational framework and important schemes being implemented by the central and state governments in India.